Do you like Marcher castles? Well, if you do, today on Third Rate Content, we are going to see the king of the Marcher castles, Ludlow Castle. Keep watching Third Rate Content. So welcome back to Third Rate Content. Today we're back in Ludlow and we will be covering Ludlow Castle today. We'll be going through there to the Outer Bailey, the massive Outer Bailey, but we'll be finding out all about that when we start the video. But of course, Ludlow developed after the installation of the Norman castle here on the promontory that overlooks the River Teme and overlooks Ludlow. So buckle up and I'll see you out here. The first time Ludlow Castle enters history by being mentioned in the chronicles is in 1138. It's not entirely certain when construction and building on the site commenced, but it is thought that parts of Ludlow Castle date back to the late 11th century, which would place it shortly after the Norman conquest of 1066. Both Ludlow Castle and Ludlow were in a corner of the important manor of Stanton, held since 1066 by the de Lacy family. The ground where the castle now stands was level in the most part, and with the north and west covered by a cliff, this was an ideal defensive position. We're just looking at Castle House here, this fine 19th century mansion. It was actually built on the site of the Tudor tennis court, which I believe was covered and was one of the only ones in the country at that time. The de Lacys and their heirs retained the lordship of Stanton until the late 13th century. But in the civil wars and strife of King Stephen's reign, it was held by their enemy Joyce de Dinan. King Stephen himself besieged the castle in 1139, and he actually showed great bravery by rescuing his ally, Prince Henry of Scotland, from a grappling iron. Here we're just looking at the outer gatehouse, and this is the remains of a late 12th century gatehouse, but it has been very much altered. But this formed the principal entrance into the castle from the marketplace, which is still there, as we can see. But it was during the late 11th, all of the 12th and the 13th century that Ludlow Castle was a Welsh border stronghold. It was also a power base for Irish conquest, as the de Lacys and others had extensive estates in Ireland, and troops would be gathered here before they were sent over the Irish Sea to quell unrest in Ireland. Yeah, look at that rain spout gargoyle. Grotesque. Yeah, so we are just going to go and have a look in what is known as the prison. Let's go see what's in there. That is a short doorway. I'm ducking right under to get in here. Who knows who's held prisoner in here? Yeah, I don't know any of the details who was held in here over the years, but I bet they weren't too happy about it. And just to the right of the prison is the stables. And no, I don't know any of the horses' names who stayed here either. We're just looking at a surviving section of the curtain wall here, about 36 feet high. The de Lacys spent much of their time in Ireland, but Ludlow remained an important power base. This absolutely huge Outer Bailey here at Ludlow Castle has been used for many things over the years of Ludlow Castle's life, from sports, jousting, tennis, to troops actually being garrisoned here. So yeah, it's been used a lot over the years, and to this day the theatre, Shakespeare and other things are performed here in the summer months. Ludlow Castle was at times taken into royal hands and at times used for meetings, as in 1224 when Henry III made a treaty with the rebel Prince Llewellyn, with Archbishop Langton as a mediator. In 1240, the last male de Lacy died. The family estates were divided, and eventually the Ludlow Castle came into the possession of Geoffrey de Gavenville, a French baron from Champagne, France. Geoffrey passed the castle on to his son Peter, who it is thought started the works on the fine North Range. But his daughter married Roger Mortimer of Wigmore, who became a very important figure in the castle's history. And we are just looking here at Mortimer's Tower, which was actually built in the 13th century, but it takes its name from the Mortimers, who acquired the castle in 1308. And we just saw the Chapel of St. Peter, which Roger Mortimer named to commemorate his escape from the Tower of London on St. Peter's Day in 1320. But interestingly, this doorway behind me was stoned up because originally it was a entrance stroke exit into Ludlow Castle that was put here when it was built. It was filled in at a later date, as I said. And it is thought that the Duke of York used this exit, direct route into Wales, to flee from the Battle of Ludford from the Lancasterian forces. You can actually see where the portcullis would have slotted in those times. But the fireplace here, again, this was added later because this became a porter's lodge, I believe. A really nice vaulted ceiling. See that glass there as well, just to add some natural light, very thoughtful. And again, this window would have been added because this would have been the doorway out into the outer bailey. It was Roger Mortimer who was the leader of a group of barons who dethroned the unpopular Edward II in 1326. Mortimer was created Earl of March, but he overreached himself and was deposed and later executed by rivals in 1330. Though the later Mortimers regained power and royal favour, and their activities brought Ludlow back into the mainstream of British politics. Yeah, this was known as the ice house. Ammunition was stored down there, safe space for it. But then later, ice was stored there in the summer, stored there in the winter for the summer months. The last male Mortimer died in 1425, but Ludlow Castle passed to his sister's son, Richard Plantagenet, Duke of York, who was leader of the Yorkists in the Wars of the Roses. This affiliation brought new importance to Ludlow, but it also resulted in it being taken and sacked by the Lancasterians in 1459. When Edward IV, son of the Duke of York, became king in 1461, Ludlow Castle became crown property. It remained a royal castle for the next 350 years, except during the Civil War and Commonwealth. In 1473, the king sent his son Edward to be brought up at Ludlow, away from the plagues and intrigues of London. The gentlemen and nobles who accompanied the prince formed a council, the Prince's Council, under the presidency of Bishop Alcock, the prince's tutor. This council gradually assumed responsibility for the government of Wales and the border counties until the 1530s. However, its control was limited. The authority of the Council of the Marches increased after 1534, when Bishop Rowland Lee was appointed Lord President. He enforced the law so vigorously that all the thieves in Wales quaked in fear. F-E-A-R-E. This meant that Ludlow became the proxy capital of Wales. Of course, the Council of the Welsh Marches was a very important and very litigious thing, so it basically ran Wales. Now we are in the fine lodging buildings, 3-storied, that were used by the many judges and legal persons who would be in the area of Ludlow for the council. They also used many lodging houses in actual Ludlow town as well. The Great Tower Gatehouse Keep has been described as one of the most curious Norman keeps still standing, though the combination of gatehouse and keep also occurs at Richmond, Yorkshire, and at Rougemont Castle, Exeter. The development was added to over time, but there were 4 main stages that can be detected. The original late 11th century gatehouse. In the 12th century, the keep was raised to a 4-storey building. In the late 12th century, the original entrance was blocked to give greater security to the main part of the castle, and a new entrance was made. And in the late 15th century, the Great Tower was reduced in size and the north wall rebuilt. Although the Outer Bailey now looks like a large field, looks can be deceptive. Because here, back in its heyday in the medieval times, there would have been stables, storehouses and workshops to supply the needs of the garrison, while the large size of this Outer Bailey suggests that it may have been used for the mustering of troops for the English invasion of Ireland in 1171, in which Hugh de Lacy was prominently involved. Of course, a historic, ancient castle like Ludlow is riddled with stories and ghosts, and the ghost story we're going to tell you today goes back right to the 12th century. Ludlow Castle was being besieged, and one of those helping defend it was the maiden Marion de la Bure. She let her lover, who was part of the besieging force, into the castle by lowering him a rope for him to ascend, all under the cover of darkness. After the 2 lovers had alighted to her chambers, 100 of his men climbed up the still dangling rope and entered the castle, thus breaking the siege immediately. As soon as Marion realised she had been duped by her traitorous lover, she slayed him with his own sword, and then threw herself to a remorseful death from the window of Mortimer's Tower, also known as the Hanging Tower. Her anguished screams were said to have been heard for many, many years afterwards. See St. Lawrence's Tower behind us over there. Don't see anyone up there today though. We're not quite as high as St. Lawrence's Tower here at the highest point of Ludlow Castle that is available to visit today. You can see another tower there, but you can't get up to that one. It's about the same height as this one anyway. Just looking down at the area where the market is held on market days, and that has been there since Ludlow Castle was built in the late 11th century. It's pretty dark in this tower staircase, but it does make you realise in castles in the medieval days it was dark at night time and in winter, because candles cost a lot of money, and places like this just weren't lit up quite like you see on the films and movies. Light would have been in short supply, so nighttime and winter, they really did bring out the kind of fears, the primal fears of the inhabitants of the castles, I imagine. I speculate. Yeah, in the main tower. Just think how old this brickwork is. Real old. This is the Chapel of St. Mary Magdalene. The nave, as you can see, is circular. Unfortunately, its rectangular chancel is no longer with us. After the First Crusade in 1099, returning pilgrims and crusaders, after seeing the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, copied the style, although there are hardly any left now in this country. The Knights Templar associated temple church in the City of London is still standing. At one time, it was linked with the Great Chamber Block by a bridge and a gallery. This was during the 16th century enlargements. Truly medieval, ancient piece of stonework. So the circular nave here at the Chapel of Mary Magdalene in Ludlow Castle is pretty unusual. There isn't many churches left standing with a circular nave like this. And it is thought that this was inspired directly from the Crusades and from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, which was visited by the Crusaders after 1099 when they recaptured Jerusalem. The date of the chapel at Ludlow is uncertain. The founder may have been Hugh de Lacy, a known benefactor of other religious houses. The rudeness of the wall arcades is consistent with such a date, but the enrichment of the door and chancel arch is probably later. Just what we're looking at here, absolutely beautiful Norman archway. But as you can see, the walls are very interesting because the Knights Templar were known as the first big-time bankers of the Western world. They used to lend money to kings and princes and nobles. But what I have noticed while visiting here is there is quite a similarity to these alcoves to what we saw in the Knights Templar cave in Shifnal, the lost Knights Templar cave, abandoned and buried underground in a rabbit hole. But I didn't realise it while I was visiting. But that carved into the sandstone is an echo of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And I learned this from reading the Shropshire Star article that did feature third-rate content. First half of it featured third-rate content on our visit to the cave. But the second half was a very scholarly study by one of the lecturers at the University of Wolverhampton who's visited the site and says that it is very much a Knights Templar sanctuary. So that is the latest scholarly works, not third-rate content's opinion. Lord, Knights Templar. Yeah, the resonation isn't quite as good in here as down there at near Shifnal. We're just looking back through the chancel arch into the chapel. The foundations of the chancel that we're looking at here are thought to be the later 16th century ones, not the original. And we're just looking down on the north range here. And this fine range of buildings was started in the late 13th century and completed in the 1320s. It is regarded as one of the finest pieces of period building in the country. It replaced earlier buildings and it is built backing on to the Norman curtain wall. The left side of the range is called the Solar Block and was later named Prince Arthur's Block because he lived there during his residence. The wing was built in 2 stages after 1283 and was incorporated with the northwest Norman flanking tower and an adjoining closet tower to form a residential unit. Resourceful builders through the ages. The Great Kitchen, this was built at the same time as the Great Hall, abutting onto an earlier wall to the south. It was probably linked to the north range by a covered gallery. And then we've got the Great Chamber Block. This contained the private apartments of the Lord and Lady of the Castle, though in the late 16th and 17th century, some of these were taken over by the Council of the Marches. And the Great Hall. This was the most important room in the castle. It was like the heart of the castle and was used for ceremonial and public occasions. On the night of 4th of November 1616, for example, there was a great feast provided with excellent music to celebrate the investiture in London of the Prince of Wales. The hall is 60 feet long and 30 feet wide with an undercroft below. The visitor now stands on a newly constructed platform at the original floor level of the hall. Entry was from a broad stair from the Inner Bailey, perhaps through a porch which has now vanished. The wooden doors, which have been diagonally arranged, framing and interlocking V-edged oak boards, may be original. Cool. This door looks old. I don't know if it's original, I doubt it, but it looks mighty old. The end of the tower, there is the tradition that Prince Edward and Prince Richard, the little princes in the tower, sons of King Edward IV, lived on this site for some years before their removal to London in 1483, where they simply vanished from the Tower of London, never to be seen again, and thought to be murdered. I doubt this view's changed much in the last several hundred years. As of 1689, Ludlow Castle was quickly abandoned. As part of the policy of the new government of William and Mary to centralise control of the whole of England and Wales, London was now where administration was run from. The people of Ludlow soon looted the castle for useful materials, and the principal rooms were soon roofless. In the 1760s, the government of the day considered demolishing the castle, but the cost was too prohibitive, which saved Ludlow Castle and saved it for all of us. Soon after, romantic ruins such as Ludlow became fashionable to be painted, returning them somewhat to the mind of the public. When this part of the staircase got blocked off, but it's proper blocked off now. We're not going up there. Old gate. Looks like it's missing the door that goes in the middle, you know, the sort of sub-door. Ludlow is today owned by the Earl of Powys and has been since the early 1800s. The Shropshire Historical Pageant of 1934 revived the tradition of entertainment at the castle, and since 1960 the Inner Bailey has been the setting for a Shakespeare play as the major item in the Ludlow Festival. Yeah, I don't know what it is about me, but I always like obscure corners, and this is what I would say is the most obscure corner of Ludlow Castle. But you can see there's a stairwell there that we can't get to, and there was obviously flooring here. So this obscure corner was still a major part of Ludlow Castle. The sound of the Crow family in castles, deserted, empty shells of castles, is so evocative. You know what? I'm a big fan of the Crow family in general. I just am. Does this pertain to Powys? Because it is the Lord of Powys who owns this castle to this very day. Oh, I haven't brought my chalk. Yeah, here in the main hall. Just thinking of all the feasting and merrymaking that went on here over hundreds of years. You can almost feel the vibe of good times and good drinks being imbibed. I think we're going to have a look through that little door. Of course, Ludlow Castle was known for its very fancy privies, otherwise known as garderobes. They actually were chambers with washing facilities and everything, state of the art for their day. Yeah, it does show how people have grown taller over the years, or they just like ducking down all the time back in those medieval days. Because I'm 6 foot and I'm ducking right down to get through here. I like the way there's hay on the floor here. It is exactly like Nottingham Castle in Robin of Sherwood would have been, well, was in the programmes. You know, that show is brilliant. Has so much accurate historical detail, as well as loads of really good kind of sword and sorcery action. And it's just really a ripping good stories. Keep going on about it, but it's my favourite programme at the moment. The first thing you look for when you're sighting a castle, I believe, is a source of water, which Ludlow has. The only castle I can think of off the top of my head without a well is Beeston Castle in Cheshire. Yeah, there's money down there. And apparently, if you could get down there and scrape back the dirt down there, you'd find loads of layer upon layer upon layer of historical detritus. But we can't get down there. Oh well. Well, we're so close to the Welsh border. Why not have a dragon in your castle? And it helps keep fuel bills down. What with winter coming on. This little door in the keep, in the main keep, it's about 1.5 feet. Well, about a foot too short for me to go under. It's being slightly hyperbolic there, but it's still a bit short for me. Yeah, and this is just the lower floor of the main keep. Very medieval. And this was once the grand entrance into the castle in the days of the de Lacys, but it was blocked in the late 12th century. The original passage was divided into a short porch in front of the gateway arch and a long gate hall behind the arch. There is only a single shaft on the east wall to mark the position of the arch, and the sally port which connected the porch with the hall can still be seen, as we can see here. It is thought that in the late 12th century, the outer archway was blocked and the passage became a storeroom or a dungeon. And it was thought that food and drink was lowered to prisoners through the vaulted ceiling, through the gaps in it. I don't know why, I really like the vibe in here. I think it's because of all the evidence of different periods building works. I mean, look at this. Wow. Whew. It literally smells of weed down here. So that was our visit to Ludlow Castle. Hope you enjoyed, but as I always say, if you're still here now, you probably did enjoy somewhat. But before you go, why don't you think about leaving a like, subscribing if you haven't already, because it really does help the channel, sharing, hitting the notification bell to keep up to date on all third-rate content goings on, and do leave a comment, because I love a good comment. I read them all and I comment back where applicable. So if I don't see you soon, I'll see you 3 times as soon. Third-rate content, sign out, bye-bye.